Hey guys, can you hear me and see me okay? I just dropped my book. Give me 1 second. Okay, I've got a stack of books here on my lap, things I'm wanting to talk with y'all about, pick up where we left off. I've got our Atlantis book, the Vortex book, a little book. This is actually why I titled this particular live stream Temples. Hey guys, hey. It's good to see y'all on here again. The reason I called this temples is because we've been visiting a lot of temples lately. And some of them I haven't had a chance to write up yet. And some of them, for whatever reason, Patreon has given me a fit lately about posting, videos that aren't live streams. I have no idea why. But I'll give you an idea. I'll give you an example of one place we went to lately. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see this because I'm basically just going to hold my phone up to the computer right now so you guys can at least get an idea of what I'm talking about. I recently went to a Hare Krishna temple. Hare Krishna is the Hare Krishna belief system is like it's a form of Hinduism is what it is. It's like an offshoot of Hinduism. And this stuff ties together. Like when you're talking about Hinduism, you're still talking about the same energies, entities, intelligences, and celestial phenomena that you're talking about in ceremonial magic and in all Abrahamic religions. For example, Shiva in Hinduism, Shiva is Enlil. That's why he was so destructive. Shiva and Enlil are just different names for the God of the Old Testament. That's what people always say. Why is the God of the Old Testament so wrathful? Why was he punishing people, destroying things, wiping out civilizations? Well, because he is the God of destruction. We've talked on here before about how the word God, G-O-D, stands for generate, order, and destroy. That those are the three things that divinity does. First, it generates form into the material world. It enters the material world and creates all different kinds of forms. And by forms, we could mean anything from trees to humans to animals to water. Whatever. It's all divinity incarnate. That is the reason that divinity poured itself into the dimensions of time and space, is to become the world. So that's what we mean by generating. That's how it generates. Well, after it generates all of these forms, they start to fall into an order. And this order could be anything. It could be anything from human civilization, the way we set up our governments or our religions, or, the way our society functions, to hierarchies in the animal kingdom, like what eats what and what runs from who and all that kind of stuff. Order. All of this stuff falls into a kind of order that we may not be able to understand all the time with our human mind, our concepts of what's right and what's wrong and how things should work and shouldn't work and all that sort of stuff. A lot of times that can prevent us from seeing the order, but there is an order. Well, the third thing is, once that order has allowed the most possible growth to come from the order that things are in, they will start to stagnate. If that order does not change, it will stagnate eventually. I talk about, like, one of the things I realized, well, the man who tutored me, my tutor, I've talked about this before. I've talked about this a lot, how he said, you'll have these people that want to join orders or lodges or whatever. And first off, they just wanted to be part of it so they can say, oh, I'm a member of this or I'm a member of that. And he was saying that stuff is absolutely irrelevant. It doesn't matter at all. It's just, for the most part, people playing dress up. Second thing, once people get in these orders, you'll have a lot of people who want to as quickly as they can, race through the grade system again, just so that they can say, I'm this or I'm that grade, or, whatever it is, which again is just about ego. And he was saying, don't focus on any of that stuff. Don't worry about any of that stuff. The only thing you should have your mind on is wringing every ounce of growth and experience and wisdom that you possibly can out of every single step of this process. What everybody else is doing, what grade they're in, what they're practicing, none of that should mean anything to you. Don't even look at that stuff. It's a waste of your time. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't compare others to you. That's kind of being in the realm of duality. All you want to do is squeeze every ounce of growth that you can out of every step of this process. And once you've done that, then go to the next phase, go to the next place, go to the next step that you'll be directed to, led to. The D, destruction, destroy, generate, order, and destroy, is what divinity does once we're locked into this rigid structure that begins to degenerate, that begins to no longer lead us towards growth, no longer lead us towards truth, but just stagnation, control, people trying to impose control on the world. Once we reach that point in the system of order, then destruction will come, level it all down, and we will start again with a new generation. Why was I talking about this? I can't remember. Oh, Shiva, that was what started it. So I had a chance to, the Hindu temple. Yeah, I forgot. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was going to tell y'all about. So in Hinduism, Shiva is what the ancient Sumerians would call Enlil, and Shiva and Enlil are what the people of the Old Testament would have called just God. But let me look for this video really quick. I mean, we've seen some amazing things lately, and I want to show you a few of them. Let me see. And I'm going to post these up also, so you can look at them more closely, but I just want to give you, here we go. Finally, there it is. Let's turn the sound on. And start it over. Give me 1 second. Oops, we don't want to turn the phone off. Technology is not my strong point, folks. Oops. I am doing all kinds of crazy stuff, taking screenshots and everything else. I'll get there. Give me 1 second. Trying to get the sound turned up so you can hear it. And let me start it over. Here we go. Okay, get ready. So that gives you at least a tiny little glimpse of some of what we've been seeing. This particular temple was in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia. There's a place in West Virginia. Remember when I was there and I was in Point Pleasant and I was going to see all the places that were connected to the Mothman, connected to Indrid Cold in one way or another? Well, another place that I went there and I will go back to, there is a place, a town in West Virginia called Moundsville. And Moundsville is known, like if you say that name to people in West Virginia, everybody knows that name. Like everybody knows, oh, that's the weird place. That's the place where there's all this weird stuff. Well, one of the weird things that people know about in Moundsville is this amazing, mind-blowingly beautiful Hindu temple that is up in the mountains. You drive to this place, they call it the Golden Palace. And I have more pictures. I'm going to put all these up so y'all can see them on there instead of trying to show them to you like a crazy person holding my phone up to the computer screen. But when you walk into this place, first off, it's a compound. It's huge. It's like a whole park area. It's not like one building. It's a bunch of buildings. So the one building that I just showed you, that's the first place we went into where they're actually doing like services. Like whenever you walk into the door, you hear people, you immediately hear the singing, you hear the musical instruments. There's people like doing all sorts of prostrations to statues, things like that. And that was one of the things, essentially what you're doing when you're prostrating to these statues is you're directing energy towards them. I've actually been ordained in two forms of Buddhism. One is the Rinzai Zen tradition of Japanese Buddhism, which was what the samurai were trained in ancient Japan. I had a Zen master who would travel back and forth from Japan to teach me. The second is Vietnamese Zen. Whenever I received ordination in the Vietnamese tradition of Zen, I can't remember how long I had to do this, but leading up to the initiation, to the ordination ceremony, I had to do 108 prostrations a day. I had this just a little photo, like I couldn't have, statues or any of that sort of stuff when I was in prison. I just had like a little photo. And it's what it means when you're saying 108 prostrations, you're basically doing something like, what's that exercise people do? Burpees? Is that what they call it? Or like squat thrusts or something like that? Like I would have to stand in front of my altar and you hold your hands together like you're praying. You hold them at your head, you hold them at your heart, and then you go all the way down onto your knees and you put your head on the floor and hold your hands palm up on the floor. And then you stand up and you do it again. Stand up, do it again. So every time you're going all the way down to the floor and standing up. And you have to do it for months. You have to do it 108 times a day, 108 times every morning. By the time you get ready to get to the ordination ceremony, my legs had never been like that hard and defined in my life. It's like you're basically doing 108 squats a day without stopping. In the beginning, you'll probably get winded and you'll get tired and you'll have to stop. But the point of it is you're supposed to work your way up to doing all 108 of them without stopping. That's exactly right. Vegas Vamp says like 108 prayer beads. That's exactly what it is. Like if you've ever seen a Buddhist mala, Buddhist malas have 108 beads on them. And this is so that you can do them without having to like count in your head. When you get back around to the tassel that you've done it 108 times. Let me see. Vegas Vamp says, what's the significance of the number 108? I can't remember. And that's terrible, but I can't remember what it was. It was something that was significant to Buddhism, something to do with it. It was essentially, it's a purification practice. Like doing the 108 things, it was for purification, but I can't remember specifically why it was 108 exactly. Let me see. Aaron L says, may I ask an off-subject question? Are the results the same if the names vibrated during the practices are done in your head rather than out loud? If I feel like I can't perform the work out loud. That question is a question that you are going to have to answer for yourself. You're going to have to try it both ways and figure out, is it working? Is it working both ways? Because it may work, one of them may work better for me than the other one does, and that may not be the case for you. Every single person may have like little idiosyncratic things that's entirely of their own practice. So I can't tell you with complete and absolute certainty. And the thing is, you don't want me to. You don't want me to tell you something with absolute certainty that you're just going to accept at face value and have faith in. Even the Buddha himself said, don't believe anything anybody tells you, not even me, unless you try it for yourself and see if it's true. So traditionally, like even in magic, back in the old days before telephones and computers and email and all that kind of stuff, like when you would get connected to a tutor, if you had a question, you had to write a letter out, like get pen and paper and write a letter to your tutor describing to them in as much detail as you possibly could what it is that you're trying to figure out, what question it is that you're wanting to answer, and then you mail that to them. So keep in mind, it's going to take you at least a day to write the letter. It's going to take them, depending on what part of the world they're in, anywhere from 3 days to a month. I remember like sending mail out in prison to other countries, and it would take a month to get there sometimes. And then however long they're going to take to respond back to you, add to that. And then however long it takes the letter to get back to you, add to that. One of the reasons for this, one of the points of it being this way, is so that hopefully by the time you did get a response back, you would have figured out a lot of this for yourself. That whatever it is you were asking about, you would have tried it. You would have invested, energy into trying to figure out. Like in this particular case, do it both ways. You do a week, do a day, whatever, however you want to do it, vibrating out loud, and then do it in your head and see which is more successful to you. If you were to just accept whatever I'm telling you, if you ask me a question and I tell you an answer, and you say, you know what, that sounds good to me, I completely believe that 100%, then all you would have really done is traded one set of dogma or preconceived ideas, whether you got it from religion or a book or some other teacher or whatever it is. All you would be doing is trading that for something that I was telling you. And that's not what we want to do in magic. What we want to do in magic is experience these things for ourselves, to know the truth for ourselves, not because somebody else told it to us, but because we have done it. We have walked the path and we know the answer to this question. Because like scientists, that's what they say. The aim of magic is the aim of religion, but the method of science. You will have known because you will have carried out experiments, just like they do in science, and your experiments will have led you to the answer to your question. Oh, let me see what y'all are talking about. Give me 1 second. Yeah, Elena Pullen says that's how my pastors used to tell us. Like, don't just believe the sermon. Look it up in the Bible. Absolutely. Exactly. Let's see. So Braden Mann says in Buddhism there is believed to be defilements or earthly desires that humans experience. There is said to be 108 of these vices that we go through during our time on earth. So there's your 108 number. That would be the 108 because they are 108 vices, or 108, as we would say in magic, impurities. And that you're trying to exercise these impurities, and that's why they look at it as a purification exercise. You're prostrating 108 times, one for each vice. But the thing about the Hindu temple and Alana, very good, Alana. Sorry. Let me see. Oh, so one thing. What was it? I just saw something. Okay, temples. So when I went into the temple, into the Hindu temple in West Virginia, these people were incredibly welcoming, incredibly friendly. And here's the thing: when you go to a place like West Virginia, backwoods in the middle of nowhere, I mean, this might sound kind of crazy in this day and age or whatever, but like I had no idea that there were that many Indian people in West Virginia. And this is just maybe my own, you know, ignorance or whatever, because it happened more than one time, not just with Indian people, but other things there. Like when I go there, you know, here it is, you're talking to somebody from Arkansas, but I go to like West Virginia and I expect everybody to be like, you know, 30 years behind the times or whatever it is. But I was amazed that it's not like, it wasn't like a bunch of white people that decided they were going to build a Hindu temple and play at being Hindu. These were like Indian families who had put a lot of time and effort and money into this place. Like I met one of the monks. I was trying to look in one of the buildings and I just wanted to get in real quick and see what was in it. So there's the temple that I just showed you guys the video of. And then there's another place, another bigger building that they were doing construction on, they call it the Golden Palace. So I was trying to see into this place, and one of the monks comes up behind me and, you know, just caught me off guard. He goes, "Do you want a tour?" And I didn't really have a lot of time. I told him, I said, you know, I'm just in and out. I got to run really quick. But I really would like to at least see inside, you know, if you don't mind me going, because they had it closed off. He said, "Sure, come on in." And he took me in. This place was, I mean, once again, like when you're like preconceived ideas, when you think of like West Virginia, for example, you think of poverty. You know, most people there are not wealthy people. This is a state of very, very poor people, uh, just like a bunch of other states in the South are. But when I walked in here, first thing I noticed is this place, this Golden Palace. This place has been built to last. This place would last through earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever was coming through there. It's not going to damage this place. The floors are solid marble. There was a lot of stained glass in the windows, and a lot of it, I even took pictures of some of it. And this is another thing, once again, that ties into the stuff about, let me see if I can find this picture really quick. 1 sec. So this is one of the windows, if you can see this. See the peacock? The peacock in the window is made so that the stained glass forms the feathers of the peacock's tail. So there is also a sect of people, and I can't remember what they're called, what their name is. These Crowley, when Aleister Crowley was writing about these people, he said that these were probably the people on Earth who had the strongest ties to the original Sumerian tradition. Well, they say that, and the Muslims over there actually hate these people. They try to put them to death. They try to kill them. They say that they're Satanists because they've got peacocks all over everything. They say that God created this realm and put all of these angels over put 7 angels over the realms of the earth. And you know, we have this, that's why we have the classical planets that we use in magic. That's why there's 7 of them, because that's what they're talking about, the 7 angels. Remember when we were reading in Atlantis last time, and we're going to go back into this a little bit, but how he was talking about to people in ancient times, they looked at the planets as the gods. That's why they called them by those names. So there were no atheists in those times, because if people were like, do you believe in the gods? They would have been like, what are you talking about? There they are. We see them every night. They're in the sky. What do you mean, do I believe in them? Well, these people, and I can't remember their names, I wish I could, but they believe that there is one angel that was put above all the others. And they call it the peacock angel. And they put this peacock on everything. That peacock angel is what they call the deity that the ancient Sumerians referred to as Enlil. All of this confusion, the reason the Muslims are saying that these people, that's it, yes, thank you. We have someone on here actually named Peacock Angel, and Peacock Angel says they are called Yazidis. Exactly. Thank you very much for that. Yes, exactly. So you have a lot of these traditions that are tied into very old ways of being that revere the peacock, because the peacock is the symbol, however you want to look at it, as God or the demiurge, because it's both the same thing. This is why, like in Thelema, in Aleister Crowley's religion, why they say that God and Satan are the same thing. And even Jesus says this in the Bible. You know, Jesus says the God of this world is Satan. But the God of this world is also the God of this world. It's not the source. It's not the source that everything came from. Everything came from something even beyond this intelligence. But it ties into the peacock. Oh, the other thing before I forget, what I wanted to read to you was from this little book they gave me. Like I said, they were incredibly friendly, incredibly welcoming. It's like as soon as you come into the door, they don't want anything from you. They're not asking for money. They're worshiping. You see people doing prostrations to temples. You hear people chanting. While I was sitting there, they stopped chanting, and one of the monks came in and did like a 30-minute sermon. And I sat there and listened to the sermon. They're just doing what they do. It's a real temple. It's not a tourist attraction. But they gave me this book, and so this little book they give you when you come into the door, it's got all the stuff in it. Like, for example, they show you. This book is supposed to let you know if you're not a Hindu, if you're not a Hare Krishna, if you've never been to a temple like this before, you don't know what you're doing, you're just kind of wandering around, which is exactly what I was doing. They give you this book. It's called Who's Who and What's What. And it tells you, like, there were so many different shrines and altars. Like, here's a picture of the main altar. And it tells you, like, there's little arrows telling you what each thing on the altar represents, what it is. And they give you this whenever you go in so that you don't get, kind of lost. But there was one thing in it I wanted to read to you that I thought was the absolute perfect description of what temples are. It says, "Welcome to the temple of the Lord. The temple is a holy place of worship and is like a portal to the spiritual realm. When you enter, you leave your troubles behind and are soothed by peace and divine vibrations that touch the soul. Please join us in discovering the inner peace, love, and divine power you possess by connecting with God in the temple." Let me see if there's anything else in this. We hope that this guidebook will give you a head start in exploring a Krishna-focused life and the deep, rich teachings and culture that support it. But it's that first paragraph that I thought was just dead on perfect. The temple is a holy place of worship and is like a portal to the spiritual realm. When you enter, you leave your troubles behind and are soothed by peace and divine vibrations that touch the soul. Now, what they just described, whoever wrote this book, what they're describing is this ties into a couple of different things. Let me think. What was the first one? My brain just went blank for a second. Holy place of worship, portal to the spiritual realm. Okay, first thing is whenever you're doing your ritual work, whenever you're doing the LBRP, whenever you're doing the lesser hexagram ritual, whenever you're doing the rose cross, all the things we normally do to get ready to do the big magic that we're about to do. You know, before you get ready to do like the greater hexagram invoking and the supreme pentagram ritual, all that, before you get to that, you're going to do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. You're going to do the lesser banishing of the hexagram. And if you've got time and the desire to do so, you're going to do the rose cross. And then you're going to set about doing your big magic. What you're doing when you're doing those three things, in addition to, purification of the space, you're also setting up your temple. You are creating a place that is between the worlds. It is no longer entirely of the physical world, and it is not entirely of the spiritual world because it still exists in the material realm. You have created a space where you are standing with one foot in both worlds. It's like you'll hear people in witchcraft sometimes talk about things like someone who walks with one foot in each world, or someone who, however they want to phrase it. This is where that comes from. When you do those rituals, you have turned the space where you're about to do them into a temple. It is a space that is neither of this world or of the spiritual. They overlap. It's a place where they merge and become one thing, but not entirely either. That's what he's talking about in this book when it says you're entering a portal into the spiritual realm. That's what you're doing when you're doing those. Let's see what y'all are talking about real quick. Just looking across. LVX says, is there anything you can do when your meridians burn out to heal faster, or do you just have to wait it out? For the most part, there's nothing you can do because you're not really going to be able to do a lot of magic when that happens, but you can go to someone else who can help you. Like if you have access to someone that really, and I don't mean like the person you might find at the local new age shop, although you might find someone really good there. I don't know. I'm not casting aspersions on anybody. But if you do know someone who is really, really good at doing energy work, energy healing, like people who are really good at Reiki, if you go to them, that can help you heal faster. Let's see. There was one other thing about this first paragraph. Let me think. What was it? But this is also one other thing about it. This is why, one of the things also that my tutor told me that made me kind of change my entire life in a lot of ways. He said, if you want to have beautiful, meaningful, amazing, fine things in your life, then go to where those things are. Because to start out with, those things are not going to come to you. If you're going through your normal life, doing whatever you do in the day, going where you normally go to work, or, where you normally go to eat, or whatever it is, nothing's changing in your life. Nothing's going to change. You have to create some sort of space for something different to happen. You have to go to the places that have the things, that have the people that you want to be surrounded by. And then eventually, when you start to accumulate enough of that energy around yourself, when your energy starts to become more like the energy of these places, then those things will start to find their way to you. Maybe a friend starts to give you tools, or something comes to you in some kind of way that is you get beautiful, amazing things. uh, and it could happen in a million different ways. See what y'all are saying. I'm just looking around, like when I used to go to the Met all the time, every day, and sit. Oh, that was another thing I want to touch on too: obelisks and temples. But when I used to go to the Met all the time, well, I'll tell you this first. The thing about temples is this is what we mean. Remember when I was talking recently about how there are other ways to pass on downloads or pass on some of this knowledge other than magic? For example, one of those ways is through geographical locations. There are certain geographical locations that have an energy that interacts with your consciousness and causes certain kinds of awakening or certain kinds of downloads to occur. There are some of these places that have been created. They are man-made. Like when we were talking about Sedona is a naturally occurring vortex zone because of the energy there, the Earth's chakras. Exactly. Vegas Vamp says the Earth's chakras. There are other ones that are entirely man-made. Anytime you see an obelisk, this is a man-made energy spot. Anytime you see an obelisk, whether it is in ancient Egypt, whether it is in Central Park behind the Met, whether it is in Washington, D.C., anytime you see an obelisk, the reason these obelisks have been put there is to harvest chi, to harvest human energy. It will always be fed into something. The obelisks, exactly. Zippomatic says there's one in Rome. Exactly. The obelisk gathers the energy because the first thing people do whenever they see an obelisk, especially when you see it in a cemetery, if you go to a Masonic cemetery, a lot of Masons' graves has obelisks on them. Well, when people see obelisks, first thing it does is draws your attention. You look at it, you're like, wow, what is that? That's nice. That's pretty. Even if it's a gravestone, you think that looks pretty amazing. You're paying attention to it. Where energy goes, or where attention goes, energy flows. Remember that saying? When you're paying attention to the obelisk, you're feeding energy to it. Well, if it's on someone's grave, like a Mason's grave, the obelisk feeds the chi into the grave and into the person. The result of that will be so that they're not forgotten. But there's also other ways and other things you can channel this energy into. For example, one of these things, going into the temple thing, in the Met, behind the Met, everybody refers to this. It is an Egyptian obelisk. It was brought over to the United States from Egypt. There were two of them. They were twins. They sent one to London and one to New York. I don't know where the one in London is now, but they were exactly alike. The one in New York, everybody refers to it as Cleopatra's Needle. That's just like the unofficial name. When people think of Egypt, they think of Cleopatra, so they just call it Cleopatra's Needle. But this thing is massive. It stands in the park, and it's exposed to the elements. Whenever they brought this thing over here, it was in flawless condition. It was lost to the sands of time for a long time. Like in Egypt, they fell over and were completely covered over by sand. People did not see them for thousands of years. That changed whenever Rome took over, whenever the Roman Empire took over Egypt. Roman soldiers excavated these obelisks. So, these things have been handled and moved around ever since the ancient Romans. You can even see, like in some of the Egyptian, let me get one thing at a time. There are temples inside the Met. For example, there's an Egyptian temple. You can go inside this temple and you can charge things with it. When you walk inside this temple, there is an altar stone in there, and it's standing in front of this little doorway. You walk inside a reconstructed temple, like it is stone, all stone from Egypt. It is a real temple, not a recreation, a reconstruction. They moved the temple from Egypt over here, put it back together in exactly the same way it was inside the Met. You walk inside this temple and you wind your way through it, and you go into this one little room, and this was the offering room to the Pharaoh who was buried in this temple. Now keep in mind, pharaohs were seen to be a bridge between the world of the gods and the world of man. Just because they died, their job was not over. Even after they died, they were still meant to be like a go-between between humanity and the gods. So people wanted to feed them energy so that they could be as strong as possible in order to keep doing this job, bringing more blessings from the gods onto the people. Well, the way they would do that, inside of the tombs, you would have this little, like a big concrete wall with all these hieroglyphics and designs on it, but running right down through the center of the wall was like a hollowed out little strip. It didn't go all the way through the stone. It was just almost like a carve, like a what's the word? Not carve. Almost like a channel, like a gutter sort of thing. They said in ancient Egypt that this is the door. Whenever you put offerings to the Pharaoh on this altar, on this offering stone, he comes through that doorway to receive the energy from the offerings. And all along the walls leading to this altar stone, you see there are carvings, hieroglyphics of people like carrying sheep and lambs and geese and sacks of grain and precious oil and all this stuff, just line after line after line of them, that they're all leaving on this altar stone. Pharaoh doesn't need the actual stuff. He just needs the energy, the intention behind it, the reverence, all of that. That's what he's absorbing. But you could go in there, and I've went in there and I've charged talismans with the energy, because if your energy accumulates on that stone, all of those thousands of years of offerings that were made in that temple have all left energetic residue on that stone. So you are talking about an incredibly powerful magical artifact. The Egyptian temple is not the only temple in the Met. There are two more. There is, where I went every single day for at least 2 years, the Sumerian temple. And the Sumerian temple was, big chunks of it were made of the library of a king named Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal was the creator of the very first library in the world. Keep in mind, he comes from the same part of the world as the ancient Sumerians. He was technically an Assyrian king. All of these areas were very tied together back then. There was a lot of trade going on between them. Each one was always conquering the other. You had Babylon, you had Assyria, you had Sumer, all of these places, but they all shared like the same religious beliefs, the same magical practices, the same type of priesthoods, the same way of passing on this information through these lineages. By the time Ashurbanipal was born, keep in mind that this was thousands of years ago. Ashurbanipal was born thousands of years ago. But by the time he was born, Sumer had already collapsed and fallen thousands of years previously. Ashurbanipal became obsessed with the ancient Sumerian traditions of magic because he believed that there were rituals, rites, artifacts, and information. He believed this with his whole heart, that would allow him to not only continue to reign, but to expand his reign and potentially continue to reign even after his physical death. So what he did was he sent out entire armies to scour the lands and bring back any of the old Sumerian cuneiform tablets that they could find, whether they were on magic, whether they were literature, whether they were astronomy and astrology records, planispheres where they were keeping track of what was going on in the nighttime sky. He said, bring me all of it. I don't care what you find, anything left behind by the Sumerians. I want this, because he knew there was power in it. The same way people still to this day know that power is in it. Whenever the United States invaded Iraq, the first place they went was not the oil fields. It was close. I mean, that's probably the second place they went. First place they went was to the museums in Iraq. The very first thing they did was scarfed up they have Sumerian clay tablets they had Sumerian clay tablets in a museum in Baghdad that have never before been translated, have never before been seen outside of Iraq, and that have information that we still don't have access to now. That was the very first place the United States military went, and those were the very first things that they took. So there are certain people who have always known that there is power in this stuff. Ashurbanipal was one of those people. He was the one who collected all of these Sumerian artifacts and put them into the world's very first library. Remember when I was just saying just a second ago that there is an obelisk, Cleopatra's Needle, behind the Met? Well, it is, and the thing about what I was getting to about how it was buried under the sands of Egypt for thousands of years until the Roman soldiers started to move them around. It was in pristine condition. This is why mummies last so long in Egypt, is because of the really super dry and lack of humidity, the atmospheric conditions there. It preserves things. Doesn't last nearly as long in places like the United States, where we have a lot more humidity, we have a lot more weather. So Cleopatra's Needle, when they had to build a railroad through Central Park to erect this temple behind the Met. Whenever they put it up, at first when they put it up, it was flawless. I mean, it was just covered in these absolutely amazing, gorgeous hieroglyphics from top to bottom. Now, I would say at least 50, maybe 75% of the hieroglyphics are gone, because it's been rained on for the past 100 years or so. It's exposed to the snow, the sleet, the rain, everything. So that has destroyed a lot of the hieroglyphics on it. But and this thing, I can't remember how many tons it weighs. I mean, it's massive. It weighs tons, like literal tons of weight. Well, the chi, or the energy that is being harvested by that obelisks, goes to feed the temples in the Met. It feeds the Sumerian temple, it feeds the Egyptian temple, and it feeds the Buddhist temple. Like, there is an entire wing dedicated to, they just call it Asian art, but if you walk into it, they have tools, they have crowns worn by lamas as they were, completing the rainbow body practices. They have statues that stood in temples where people were prostrating to them for thousands of years. All in these different places. So when I used to go in there, I used to go into the Sumerian temple every single day. For almost 2 years, that was my home. Eventually, I would even start taking people on tours of. Shane Kerrigan says, I have such a vivid memory of eating a bodega sandwich on the bench by the obelisk behind the Met. Used to do that all the time. Yeah. Used to go and get, I was thinking about this yesterday, the bagels in New York. I can't eat bread at all anymore. But bagels in New York are like nowhere else in the United States. And I used to go, and once again, this is like a combination of just white trash and New York City. I would go to those bodegas and get like a big, thick bologna sandwich, just bologna and cheese sandwich on a bagel, and take it out there and sit in the park out by on the benches. The obelisks, it's surrounded by benches, and people do initiation rituals there also. There are local magic groups, people that are doing like orders that do initiation rituals at night out there by the obelisks. But that obelisk feeds into the temples at the Met, and I used to go there and surround myself with those things every single day. The more I surrounded myself with those things, the more things that were associated with that stuff started to find their way to me. And just they still do all the time, little things like, this is Ashurbanipal. This is a just a metal figure, and I think someone probably gave this to me at some point, but it's a little figure, and it's heavy. It's made out of solid metal, solid steel. But that is Ashurbanipal, the king who rounded up all of those Sumerian clay tablets, artifacts, because he believed that they would allow him to cement and expand on his empire. So let me think. Good Lord, we've been on here almost an hour already. So one thing I want to talk to you guys about tonight also, the obelisk. One more thing about the obelisks. This is the same thing in Washington, D.C. The obelisk in Washington, D.C. that harvests chi feeds into the Pentagon. There's a reason the Pentagon is a building with 5 sides. It's because it's modeled on the pentagram. How many other buildings do you see that are created like a 5-pointed star? You know, most buildings have 4 sides, 4 walls. You're not going to find very many that are shaped like a pentagram. Well, the energy that is harvested by that obelisk goes into the Pentagon. Let me see. Well, the other thing. Shane. Shane says there's a couple of good questions on here. Shane says, do you ever work with small obelisks in your practice? I absolutely do. I don't have one laying right here with me, although I do have some. But I have, basically they're these. This is an obelisk. That's it. Just a crystal. This particular one is citrine. So yeah, I have used them. But there was one other question. What was it? Who was saying something? So Damien Bratton says, back to the subject of Egypt, although it is a Hebrew word, has anyone activated their Merkaba? The Merkaba is your aura. It's your energy body. That's why they call it the chariot that will take you up to the throne of God. The Merkaba is a Judaic name for the lunar body, the Mercury body. If you're taking some of the classes and stuff that MRA has been talking about, where he talks about the lunar body, the Mercury body, the mercurial body, and the solar body, all of those are the Merkaba. The Merkaba, your aura is the chariot that you use to ascend to the throne of God. One other thing I want to talk about with y'all tonight, and I know I always say this, I keep saying this, and we aren't getting to them, but we are going to get to these because there's a lot more stuff in here I want to read to you, especially in this Atlantis book. It goes into a lot of just how much trash there is when you're talking about the subject of Atlantis, how most of it is just made up cosmic woo-woo stuff. And he goes into things like how these stories weren't meant to be taken literally. They were a kind of metaphor or a kind of parable that is explaining certain occurrences, but these occurrences may not be exactly like what the story looks like. For example, the flood in the Bible. The flood, the story of the flood, is not talking about a literal physical flood of water. We've talked about this on here several times. And John Michael Greer talks about the same thing about Atlantis, how it's not meant to be like, a concrete truth. It's meant to be a parable or a metaphor that has information encoded in it that allows you to understand more things. So we're going to get back to that. And we're also going to get back to this Vortex book. This Vortex book is really thin. It's only, it's less than 100 pages. Yeah, it's 63 pages. So we might read this whole thing just because I think it's really useful. Even if you never go to Sedona in your life, you have vortexes where you are. Different places have different kind of energies. One example, and I think this is like one of those blatantly obvious things, like in New Orleans, whenever you see this, you can't unsee it when you become aware of it. Like different places have different, let's call them planetary energies. You know how the energies of the planets symbolize different things? Well, the energy of New Orleans is very Saturnian. The energy here is very much of Saturn in a bunch of different ways. Mardi Gras is nothing but a continuation of the old Saturnalia festivals from ancient Roman times. There's nothing new under the sun. Stuff's been done forever, probably will always be done forever. It is a Saturnian celebration is what Mardi Gras is. But one thing you also notice here, the energy of Saturn. What does Saturn do? Remember, what does God stand for? Generate, order, and destroy. Saturn destroys. You find that happening a lot in New Orleans in a lot of different ways. And it could be on all different levels. Some people will come here and their lives will disintegrate because they will fall into drinking nonstop and, eating tons of food, all this rich food nonstop. And it leads to unsavory consequences. On the other end of the spectrum, you can see, like, for example, they say that within 50 years, there will be no more New Orleans. They say that every single year, New Orleans sinks an average of 2 more inches. Sinks 2 inches. And keep in mind, most of this place is already below sea level. There are places where you can stand and you're looking up at the Mississippi River. That's how much further below sea level you are. And it's getting worse. It's sinking 2 inches every year. So it's that Saturnian energy of eventually this whole place is going to disintegrate. Let's see, what are y'all talking about? Oh, so let's see. One other thing I want to talk about, and I don't know why, this was just something that was on my mind earlier, and I've never talked about this before. I don't know that I ever will again, probably not publicly. But this is tied into my case, the case that they sent me to death row for, the case they used to try to murder me. People have always asked me, and there's a ton of, there's a ton of speculation out there about who was guilty and was it, one of the victim's family members and all this. We're going to a hearing on June 23rd to try to get new DNA testing done. And if you've been with me for a while, and some of y'all have been with me for 20 years or so, but if you've been with me, you've seen that my brain went blank. Oh, they've tried to prevent this testing from being done. That they have done everything they possibly can. They lied and told us the evidence had been destroyed in a fire, that it had been lost, that it didn't exist anymore. They did everything they could to keep us from being able to do this testing. When we did finally when my attorneys went into the police station and saw it with their own eyes and they could no longer lie about it or cover it up, then all of a sudden they started fighting tooth and nail to keep us from doing DNA testing. We're going to court on June 23rd to argue before the judge that we should be able to do this testing. If this judge agrees to this, the testing itself will take less than 2 days to do. The lab has already said they're standing by waiting on it. They're chomping at the bit. They want it. The second it's in their hands, they will do the testing. Why have they fought so hard? Why have they fought so long to keep this covered up and to prevent us from doing these testing? People ask me all the time, who do you think did this? Do you think it was, Mark Byers, or do you think it was Terry Hobbs, or whatever it is? And I always say, well, Terry Hobbs was the person whose DNA they actually found at the crime scene. But I don't say that he did it. I don't point the finger at anyone, because I don't want to do to someone else what was done to me. People looked at me and said, well, he looks guilty. He looks like a weirdo. He looks like a freak. So therefore, he's probably guilty. I don't want to do the same thing to anyone else that was done to me. But I will tell you this. No one else has come to this conclusion but me. I'm not speaking for anyone else. I'm not speaking for, the guys who made the Paradise Lost documentaries. I'm not speaking for anyone that was connected, Amy Berg, whenever I was actually a producer on West of Memphis. I'm not speaking for any of these people. I don't think this has ever crossed any of these people's minds. I think they have an idea of who they think did it, and that's fine. That's their thing. I started to come to I've had a lot of years to think about this. I sat in a prison cell for 2 decades, and I had a lot of time to look at this case over and over and over, every little detail of it. And then I got out, and I've been out for 10 years, so I've had about 30 years to look at every detail of this case and really think about it. And over a period of 30 years, I can't prove this, not yet. We'll see. If we can get this DNA testing done, we'll see what comes of it. But I believe, I am convinced that it was a cop. And I'm pretty sure I even know which one. There was a cop at the crime scene that was not even a member of the West Memphis Police Department. He was a cop in the next town. There was no reason for him to be at this crime scene. He's the one who led the West Memphis Police Department right to the bodies, right to what nobody else could find them. Nobody knew where they were. They were lost. They're just reported missing at this point. He leads them right to where they are. He admitted this out of his own mouth. He said that the second they started to pull the bodies out of the water, the first thing out of his mouth was, Damien Echols finally did it. He went and killed somebody. It's the first thing he says. There's no reason for my name to even be coming up in this conversation yet. The police say they didn't even consider me a suspect until weeks later. But he's saying the very first thing that comes out of his mouth whenever they find these bodies is Damien Echols did it. This same cop would eventually, he didn't get fired. He was forced to resign when he was caught molesting a young boy in a public bathroom. After he resigned, after he was caught molesting a boy in a public bathroom, he then goes, and his new career was to buy a ranch and create like a boys' home where all of these young boys that get in trouble for whatever reason or that don't have a mother and father looking out for them, they get sent to this man's ranch, and he's just there with all these young boys out in the middle of nowhere. I could be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. I've been wrong a lot of times in my life. I'm not omnipotent. But that's the conclusion that I have come to. Just from my own reasoning, my own logic, and looking at all of this. No, Carrie Jade says, is this the Satan expert? No, he died. He died. But that's just the conclusion that I have come to myself. Hopefully, when we get into court, we're going to see results back from this stuff really fast. And it'll be shown one way or another whether that's true. Yeah, John says it makes sense. It absolutely does make sense. Andrew says that man sounds pure evil. I absolutely believe this man was pure evil. I mean, this was one of the main people who was behind all of the satanic panic stuff. Remember whenever they were rounding up people, and this is one of, well, there's a lot of stuff these people used to do that I saw, that I was a witness to in our neighborhood, even a couple of years before these murders happened. I saw them doing a lot of really weird, shady stuff. But these were the people who were behind all the satanic panic garbage that was going on in the Arkansas area. Is that cop still alive? Who said that? Alex Johnson. Alex Johnson says, is that cop still alive? He is. He absolutely is. As a matter of fact, one time we tried to talk to him. We sent a film crew. When we were making a documentary, we sent a film crew to his home. We tracked him down. Sent a film crew to his home. Keep in mind, like I said, I'm the only person that has been thinking of this. The film crew had no idea about any of this. This isn't something I told them. I've just been letting everyone come to their own conclusions the way that I have. But whenever this film crew showed up at his house, he immediately ran into the back of the house, into a bathroom, and started crying and wailing. His wife answers the door, and she says, he can't talk to you today. He's freaking out in the bathroom. He's crying, blah, blah, blah. He went into a pure panic attack. They talked to him on the phone that night. He agrees the next day that he'll talk to him. He went out the next day and they talked to him. It was normal. I think the reason he freaked out whenever they showed up, whenever the camera crew showed up, he freaked out because he believed that someone had finally realized it was him. That someone had figured out it was him, and they were there to expose him on film. That's why he ran. That's why he barricaded himself in the bathroom and started crying. That's why he wouldn't talk to him. When they talked to him on the phone that night, keep in mind, they don't know this. None of these people know this. They're like, no, we're just wanting to interview you about what you know from, what you remembered from all those years ago. He's like, oh, okay, we'll come by tomorrow and I'll talk to you then and I'll tell you. After they told him, after he realized that they weren't on his trail, then he was okay. But we'll see. We will see in June, June 23rd, right around the time of the summer solstice. Like summer will have hit its peak by then. And here's the thing, too. I think that's very auspicious for me, a very auspicious date for me, because I've always kind of separated the wheel of the year into two sections: the section ruled by the Oak King and the section ruled by the Holly King. The Oak King rules the time of year when light is coming to its peak. The Holly King rules the time of year whenever the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. I always, every year when I was growing up, I never felt safe, I never felt comfortable, and I never felt home until after we hit the summer solstice and pass it, so that day has peaked. The Oak King has hit his peak, and it's all downhill from here, from that point on for him, and the Holly King is rising in power. And Christmas was always a major thing for me. It was something I always loved, like the energy of it in there. Like it was something I would meditate on for weeks at a time sometimes to maintain my sanity. Just the energy that was in the air around Christmas. And that is all associated with the Holly King. Even when you look at Coca-Cola's version of Santa Claus, the image of Santa in this red suit and the black belt and the black boots and all that, that was invented by Coca-Cola. That's why he's wearing a red and white outfit, because it was the colors of Coca-Cola. But even that, what Santa Claus is just another rendition of the Holly King. So we are going to be going into court as the Holly King, as we go into that time of year where the Holly King is becoming more powerful. Okay, guys, I am going to shut up because I'm rambling on like a crazy person. But who is that? Who's that? Mandy Bailey says, is it in Little Rock or Crittenden County? Right now, it's looking like it's going to be in West Memphis. It's going to be in West Memphis, Arkansas, not in Little Rock. So I am probably going to go down and stay in a hotel in Memphis. I don't like being in West Memphis any more than I absolutely have to. There's no reason to be there. There's nothing there unless you're looking for the world's biggest truck stop. That's their claim to fame. There's nothing in West Memphis. And I just don't feel safe there. So I'm probably going to stay across the bridge in Memphis. But right now, and as I'll keep y'all posted as we move closer to the date, as we move closer to June 23rd. That's probably most likely the date it's going to stick at. But if they decide to move it either to the seat of Crittenden County or, wherever else, I'll keep y'all posted. But as of right now, it looks like it's going to be in West Memphis, Arkansas. Yeah. Okay, I am going to shut up and well, Andrew talking about Buc-ee's. Yes, Buc-ee's. If y'all don't know Buc-ee's, I have a thing for Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is these massive truck stops that they have in Texas and Alabama. They are like the Walmart of truck stops. These places are incredible, and their mascot is Buc-ee the Beaver. John, I hope you were there too. I would very much like to see you there in the courtroom if you're possible. Yes. All right, guys, I am going to shut up. Whenever we come back in a couple of days, we are going to, now this book, again, we're going to go back into this. I swear I'm going to shut up. I realize we're 15 minutes over. But there are sections of this. Some of his books, some of John Michael Greer's books, every single line on every single page holds your attention all the way through from beginning to end. Like Monsters, Monsters is one of those books that is just like bam, bam, bam. The whole time you're reading it, not only are you entertained, but there's epiphanies and realizations in every paragraph. Others, like say, for example, his book Circles of Power, are more dry, and you really have to go in and seek out the really good information. This one is a little more dry. It's not a stupid book, you know. And when I say stupid, here's the thing: when I hear about stuff like Atlantis or whatever, and he even says this in here, he's like, I didn't care about that. I didn't want to know anything about Atlantis. Atlantis doesn't mean anything to me. You know, it's like people when they talk about aliens, they're like, do you believe in aliens? I don't care. I don't care if they're there. I don't care if they're not there. As long as they're not messing with me, it really means nothing to me. You know, there could be a million aliens, there could be 0 aliens, whatever. As long as they're not messing with me, I don't care. That's kind of how I felt about Atlantis. It's like whether it existed, whether it didn't exist, whatever, it means nothing to me. But a lot of it was because I didn't understand how much of that sort of lore was tied into magic and the history of magic. He talks about the same thing, how Atlantis was not a subject he was even remotely interested in, and he ends up writing a book about it just in this roundabout way. Parts of this are kind of dry. Parts of it, there's a lot of information in it. Stuff you got to really take in, you know, a lot of like really, not philosophical, what's the word? Academic, like a lot of academic sort of stuff that you have to get through. But there are also parts of it that are just amazing. So what I'm trying to do in order to keep from boring you to tears is go through and find the amazing parts, the parts that are connected to the things we're talking about on here in certain ways, without bogging you down with the more boring stuff. And that's what we're going to get to in here. And we're also, like I said, we're going to read probably this whole Vortex book, just because you don't have to go to Sedona. There are vortexes all around you, both good and bad, negative and positive energy, destructive and beneficial. And it's up to you how you want to use them. This is just a little book that tells you not only about like the nature of vortexes, but also techniques you can do to like tap into them and use the energy of them in your workings. Okay, I'm going to shut up because we're an hour and 20 minutes in. I just want to say again, thank you guys so much for being with me, for sticking with me through all this time. Another thing, since I'm having trouble getting these videos like of the temple posted to Patreon, I'm going to put them on my social media accounts so that y'all can see them there. Like I'm going to post that video I was playing for you earlier at the Hare Krishna temple. I'll post that on Instagram as well as some other things on there so that you can see them there at least. I can get the still photos up on here. That's no problem. But for some reason, it's giving me a fit with the video. So I'll put the videos on Instagram and probably Twitter so that y'all can find them and see them. And I'll put the still photos on here. All right, guys. I love y'all. And I'll talk to you in a few days. Bye-bye.